Ruby stood at the edge of the old oak tree, her fingers lightly tracing the smooth bark. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the meadow. A gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the quiet whispers of memories she could never forget. Her heart ached, the pain of it so deep, it felt like an endless ocean swallowing her whole. Logan had been the love of her life. They had met when they were children, both lost in the world in their own way. Ruby had been shy and quiet, a little girl who preferred the company of books and nature to the noise of the world. Logan, on the other hand, had always been outgoing, his laughter infectious, his eyes always full of dreams. They were opposites, yet they fit together like two puzzle pieces meant to be. It was under this very tree that Logan had first told her he loved her, his words so simple yet so full of meaning. She could still hear his voice, soft and tender, like a promise that would last forever. "I'll always be here, Ruby," he had said, holding her hand with a firmness that made her feel safe. "No matter what, I'll never let go." And she had believed him, with every piece of her heart. As they grew older, their love only deepened. Logan became a man full of ambition and dreams, and Ruby stayed by his side, her quiet presence always a source of strength for him. They dreamed of a future together, of a life filled with laughter, shared moments, and simple joys. They spoke of getting married, of growing old together, of building a family. But life, as it often does, had a different plan. Logan had gone to war, not because he wanted to, but because duty called. Ruby had begged him not to go, her heart filled with fear, but he had smiled at her with that reassuring smile of his, the one that made her believe everything would be okay. "It's just for a little while, Ruby," he had said. "I'll come back to you, I promise." But promises, sometimes, are fragile things. The days without Logan were long and filled with a constant ache. Ruby spent her nights staring at the stars, whispering to him as though he could hear her. She wrote him letters, even though she knew he would never read them. Each word was a piece of her heart, sent out into the world, hoping it would reach him. Then came the letter that changed everything. Logan had been gone for a year when the news arrived. It was a cold, rainy evening when the knock on the door came. Ruby had opened it, expecting a letter from Logan, as she always did, but instead, a man stood before her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Miss Ruby," he had said softly. Logan didn't make it back. He died on the battlefield. Her world shattered in an instant. The ground beneath her feet seemed to disappear, and she sank to her knees, unable to breathe, unable to understand. Logan was gone. Her love, her everything, had been taken from her. The weeks that followed were a blur. She couldn't bear to look at the world, couldn't bear to hear the laughter of others. All she could feel was the emptiness that filled her heart, the weight of the loss pressing down on her with every passing moment. She stayed in her house, in the room they had shared, the place where he had promised to always be. But he was gone. The days turned to months, and still, Ruby could not bring herself to leave the room. She would sit by the window, staring out at the world, her eyes distant, her heart heavy. She would speak to him, her words soft and broken. "Logan, why did you have to leave me? Why did you promise and then go away?" Her grief was a constant companion, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. It was in every quiet moment, in every lonely night, in every sunrise that seemed too bright to bear. Ruby often visited the oak tree, the place where they had shared their love, their dreams, their promises. It was the only place where she felt close to him, the only place where she could still feel his presence. She would sit beneath it, her fingers brushing the bark, as though trying to hold on to the last remnants of him. And every time, she would whisper to the wind, "I'll wait for you, Logan. I'll wait for you forever." But as the years passed, the waiting grew harder. The pain did not lessen, though Ruby had learned to carry it more quietly. It was as though a part of her heart had been locked away, buried deep inside her, and she couldn't bear to open it again. There were moments when she thought she could feel him, a soft breeze, a whisper in the air, but each time she reached out, it was just a fleeting feeling, gone before she could grasp it. Ruby's friends and family urged her to move on, to let go of the past and find a way to live again. But how could she? How could she live without the person who had been her everything? How could she fill the hole that Logan had left in her heart? And so, she waited. She waited for a sign, for a miracle, for anything that might bring him back to her. One evening, as Ruby sat beneath the oak tree once more, Her heart heavy with longing, she heard a rustling sound behind her. She turned, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the fading light of the evening, was a figure. A figure she had not seen in so long, but one that she knew instantly. It was Logan. Her heart leapt in her chest, her hands trembling as she stood up. "Logan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Is it really you?" He smiled, the same warm, comforting smile that had always made her feel safe. "I'm sorry it took so long, Ruby," he said softly, his voice carrying a sadness that mirrored her own. "But I'm here now. I'm here to stay." Tears filled her eyes as she stepped toward him, her heart beating wildly in her chest. She reached out, her hands trembling, and he took them in his, holding them gently but firmly, as though he never wanted to let go again. "I never wanted to leave you, Ruby," he said, his voice low and full of emotion. "But I couldn't keep my promise. Not in the way I wanted to. I've been lost for so long, and I'm so sorry." Ruby's heart broke all over again. She had waited for so long, and now, here he was, standing before her, but with an emptiness in his eyes that she had never seen before. "Logan, Ruby started, but the words failed her. How could she explain the years of pain, the endless nights of longing? How could she put into words the ache that had never left her? He seemed to understand, his eyes filled with the same sorrow that she carried. "I know, Ruby, I know, but I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. And I never will." She closed her eyes, the tears falling freely now. She had waited for so long, and now, the waiting was over. But the sorrow remained, the sorrow of forever. Logan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though he could somehow make up for all the years they had lost. And in that moment, Ruby felt the warmth of his embrace, the power of his love, and the deep, unspoken understanding between them. But as she stood there, wrapped in his arms, she knew that the sorrow of forever would never truly fade. Love, sacrifice, pain, these were the things that shaped them, the things that bound them together in ways words could never express. They would never be the same. But in each other's arms, they had found a piece of home. And that, in itself, was enough.